Freddie Mercury, the eternal heartbeat of Queen, was not just a singer, but a symphony of passion, pain, and defiance. When the world remembers him, it's not only for the music that filled stadiums, but for the haunting silence that followed his final breath. His last words before dying were not merely whispered to friends, they were a farewell to humanity, a soft confession that love and art would always outlive the flesh. Freddie once said, "I don't really care. I don't have any aspirations to live to 70. To him, life wasn't measured by years, but by songs, each melody a heartbeat, each lyric a fragment of his soul. In the late 1980s, when AIDS began its cruel invasion, Freddie's body weakened, but his will remained unshakable. Every morning, he still dressed elegantly, brewed his tea, though by his own admission, he was terrible at it, and walked into the studio with quiet grace. The disease might have been eroding his strength, yet it could never touch his discipline. Even as his voice trembled, Freddie asked Brian May to adjust the rhythm and pitch to match his fading breath. That's when The Show Must Go On was born, a song that became both prophecy and promise. Before recording, everyone doubted he could make it through even one verse. But Freddie, pale and exhausted, stepped into the booth, lifted his head, and delivered the entire song in one breathtaking take. When the final note echoed through the studio, silence followed, not from failure, but from awe. He was no longer just singing, he was fighting time itself. Through music, he defied mortality and won. Behind the grandeur of fame and thunderous applause, Freddie Mercury's world grew smaller, quieter, as his illness advanced. But within that silence, love bloomed in its purest form. Mary Austin, the woman Freddie once called the love of my life, never left his side. Their romance had long transformed into something deeper, something words could barely hold. Mary once said softly, "It took a long time for me to really fall in love with this man, but once there, I could never turn away." She became his confidant, his soul's anchor, the one person who saw the man behind the legend. And then there was Jim Hutton, Freddie's partner during his final years, a gentle soul who cared for him not as a superstar, but as a man fighting a private battle. Alongside them stood Peter Freestone, his loyal assistant, and close friends like Elton John and Dave Clark, a small chosen family who shielded him from the world's cruelty. Despite the pain, Freddie never allowed pity to fill the room. He refused tears, preferring laughter. He still cracked jokes, still invited friends for quiet evenings. With fine wine, classical music, and that unmistakable twinkle in his eyes, even as his body thinned, his spirit only grew larger. When tabloids began publishing photos of his frail frame, he said nothing. He never explained, never defended himself. To his closest friends, he simply said, "I still have work to do. When the time comes, I will speak." And he meant it. Those final years gave birth to The Miracle and Innuendo, albums heavy with truth, pain, and beauty. Each lyric felt like a page from his diary. The days of our lives, he sang, as if confessing quietly to the mirror, his face thin, but his gaze still burning. And at the end of that music video, he looked straight into the camera, into the hearts of millions, and whispered, "I still love you." It was not just a goodbye to his fans, it was a promise that his love and his voice would never fade. By the early 1990s, Freddie Mercury's world had narrowed to the quiet rooms of Garden Lodge, his beloved home in Kensington. It was no longer a mansion of parties and music, but a sanctuary of calm filled with flowers, paintings, and faint melodies of classical operas. Here, surrounded by art and the people he loved, Freddie prepared to face the end, not with fear, but with dignity. His circle was a small yet unbreakable: Mary Austin, Jim Hutton, Peter Freestone, and Dave Clark. They took turns caring for him, not as nurses, but as friends. Freddie made one request: treat me normally, no pity. Even as his body weakened, he insisted on keeping his routine, combing his hair, wearing crisp shirts, greeting visitors with a smile. Self-respect was his final armor. He refused heavy morphine, choosing clarity over comfort. He wanted to feel the world, even if only through pain. He spent hours listening to opera, humming softly between breaths. Music is the only thing that will stay with me until the end, he once told Jim. And indeed, even as his strength faded, his mind remained alive with melodies. When he could no longer stand, he sang sitting down. Each time he finished a verse, he'd whisper, "That will do." To his bandmates, those words were sacred, as if he were sealing pieces of his soul inside every song. In his final recording session, he worked on Mother Love with Brian May. Freddie managed to sing most of it, but not the final verse. Too weak to continue, he smiled faintly and said, "I'll finish it later." He never did. After his passing, Brian recorded the missing lines himself, a last duet between brothers, between life and death. As November 1991 arrived, Freddie knew the time was close. On November 23rd, he issued his final public statement. "I wish to confirm that I have AIDS. I believe now is the time for my friends and fans to know the truth." The next day, November 24th, Freddie Mercury slipped quietly into eternal rest. He passed away at home, surrounded by those he loved, Jim by his side, Mary holding his hand. His lips curved into a faint smile, as if he was hearing music only he could understand. Outside Garden Lodge, thousands gathered with candles, flowers, and tears. London's cold air trembled with voices singing, "We are the champions." The world had lost a star, but gained an immortal light. The day after his passing, the world stood still. News of Freddie Mercury's death swept through headlines. The voice of Queen is gone. But inside Garden Lodge, silence reigned. His funeral was private and solemn, held under the ancient Zoroastrian tradition of his faith. Only his family, Queen's bandmates, and a few close friends attended. Mary Austin walked slowly, holding Freddie's portrait, while his parents sat quietly at the front, their grief hidden behind calm reverence. There were no grand speeches, no cameras, only soft prayers, a faint hum of "Love of My Life," and the scent of white roses. After the ceremony, Mary fulfilled his most sacred wish. "I don't want anyone to turn my resting place into a shrine." To honor that, she buried his ashes in an undisclosed location, known only to her. Even today, no one knows where Freddie Mercury truly rests. It was his final act of privacy, a curtain drawn after the last encore. When his will was read, it reflected the same loyalty that defined his life. Half of his fortune, including Garden Lodge, was left to Mary Austin, the woman he called "my common-law wife." "She'll always be there for me," he had once said. "I trust her completely." The rest went to his parents, his sister Kashmira, and a few close friends. Jim Hutton received a significant portion and cherished keepsakes, the small symbols of a great love. Some questioned his choices, but those who truly knew Freddie understood. For him, trust was worth more than fame or fortune. In the days that followed, stories began to surface about his last acts of kindness. Peter Freestone, his assistant, recalled that Freddie wanted to leave with dignity. Elton John later revealed that he received one last Christmas gift from Freddie, a painting he'd admired long ago, wrapped with a note that simply read, "With love, from Freddie." Even in death, he found a way to give beauty. His passing was more than the end of a musical era. It was a human awakening. For years, Freddie had avoided speaking about his illness. But by choosing honesty in the end, he helped the world see AIDS not as a stigma, but as a shared tragedy that demanded compassion. His courage turned silence into empathy, sorrow into purpose. Millions began testing, learning, and donating to research. His final truth, spoken so softly, saved countless lives, and as his fans sang, "I still love you and the show must go on," the world realized his life was not just a performance. It was a message that even in the face of death, art and love can never die. After Freddie's passing, the lights of Wembley dimmed, but the echo of his voice refused to fade. In the studio, Queen's remaining members, Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon, gathered around the unfinished tracks Freddie had recorded before his death. His voice, fragile yet fierce, filled the room like a haunting spirit. They worked in silence with reverence, crafting what would become Made in Heaven. Each note felt sacred, a message from beyond, as if Freddie himself was guiding their hands. When the album was released in 1995, the world wept once again. In the song Mother Love, Freddie's voice trembles between exhaustion and eternity. The final verse, sung by Brian May, completed what Freddie could not finish. A farewell whispered through harmony. Listeners could hardly believe that such power came from a man so close to death. It was as if he had borrowed time just to leave one more gift behind. His will to create, even as his body failed, became a living symbol of human strength. Through Bohemian Rhapsody, We Are the Champions, Love of My Life, and Don't Stop Me Now, Freddie's spirit lived on. His songs became timeless hymns of courage, sung in the stadiums, bars, and lonely bedrooms alike. Each lyric carried his heartbeat, each chorus his defiance. Experts later studied his voice, that impossible instrument that spanned 4 octaves, bending tone and texture with supernatural precision. They found that Freddie's vocal cords vibrated in ways unlike most human voices, creating a tremor that felt almost divine. No classical training, no rules, just raw emotion turned into sound. His art transcended genres, genders, and generations. He wasn't just a singer, he was freedom personified. When he stood on stage, mustache sharp, leather glistening, fist raised, he was the embodiment of unrestrained authenticity. He shattered stereotypes, embracing both a strength and vulnerability, showing the world that true power lies in honesty. Even his death changed how humanity spoke about AIDS. Before him, it was a word whispered in fear. After him, it became a cause, a movement. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley in 1992 gathered 70,000 fans and hundreds of millions of viewers around the world. Artists like Elton John, David Bowie, Annie Lennox, and George Michael sang in his honor, transforming grief into awareness. From that concert was born the Mercury Phoenix Trust, a foundation dedicated to fighting HIV/AIDS globally. Through it, Freddie's name continued to save lives long after his voice went silent. He once said, "I won't be a rock star, I will be a legend." And he was right, because legends don't die, They evolve, reborn in every song, every heart that dares to live boldly. Decades have passed since that November day, yet Freddie Mercury's presence still lingers in his music, in his home, and in the millions of hearts he touched. Inside Garden Lodge, every object remains where he left it. His piano, his paintings, his handwritten notes. Mary Austin, the keeper of his memory, said she often feels his presence as if he's just in the next room, ready to burst into song. The house has become a quiet shrine of love and remembrance, though no one is allowed to treat it as one. It is a living testament to the man who turned pain into poetry. Far from London, in Montreux, Switzerland, a bronze statue of Freddie now faces Lake Geneva, one arm raised in eternal triumph. Fans from every corner of the world travel there, laying flowers and singing his songs beneath the open sky. They don't come to mourn. They come to celebrate a man who refused to live by anyone else's rules. Across generations, artists continue to draw from his fire. Lady Gaga took her name from Radio Gaga. Adam Lambert, who now sings with Queen, calls Freddie a guiding light. Bands like Muse, The Killers, and Panic at the Disco all carry pieces of his theatrical soul. The 2018 film Bohemian Rhapsody reignited the world's love for him, allowing new generations to meet the man behind the legend, his brilliance, his flaws, his truth. It reminded the world that Freddie Mercury's story was never just about fame or tragedy. It was about the courage to live without apology. He gave everything to music and asked for nothing in return but authenticity. He didn't preach. He didn't demand acceptance. He simply existed fearlessly. And in doing so, he changed the world. Freddie's journey from Farrokh Bulsara, a shy boy in Zanzibar, to Freddie Mercury, one of the most magnetic performers in history, is the proof that art can transcend time, disease, and even death. He lived passionately, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that sings louder than any voice ever could. And somewhere beyond the reach of time, his voice still echoes in the swell of an orchestra, in the rhythm of a heartbeat, whispering the same words he once spoke with a smile. I still love you. Because for Freddie Mercury, the show never truly ended.